It was a crisp autumn afternoon in the heart of the city, where the streets buzzed with footsteps, laughter, and the occasional honking of impatient drivers. Restaurants lined the sidewalk, their ambient lighting and well-dressed hosts welcoming in the city's wealthiest patrons. Among them sat Eleanor Walsh, a formidable name in the world of tech and finance, known to the media as the paralyzed millionaire. Her backstory, a tragic car accident that left her in a wheelchair 5 years ago, had become the stuff of internet folklore. Despite her physical limitations, Eleanor had only grown more powerful in her pursuits, her mind as sharp as the tailored suits she wore. That day, Eleanor was seated at a small bistro table outside her favorite five-star restaurant, Le Monde d'Or. A steaming plate of grilled salmon, herbed vegetables, and roasted potatoes sat before her, untouched. She stared at it blankly, her appetite dulled by the endless meetings and decisions that ruled her life. She was alone, as she often preferred. That's when she noticed him. A small, barefoot boy, no older than 6, stood just a few feet away. His dark brown eyes, too serious for his age, locked onto her face. Not the food, not the wheelchair, but her. He wore a faded brown shirt and matching shorts, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture of peculiar formality. There was no begging in his stance, no outstretched hand, no shivering or tears. Just presence. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" The boy took a breath, then said softly, "I can heal you. But I'm hungry. Can I have your leftovers?" She blinked. The sheer audacity of the statement nearly made her laugh. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Heal me?" He nodded. "You're what, 6 years old? You think you're some kind of doctor." "Not a doctor," he replied quietly, "but I can take your pain." There was something in the way he said it, so devoid of arrogance or playfulness, that unsettled her. Eleanor leaned back in her wheelchair, studying him with new eyes. His feet were dusty. His clothes, though ragged, had been carefully tucked in. And those eyes, they weren't the eyes of a child lost in fantasy. They were ancient. "What's your name?" she asked. "Malik." "Malik," she repeated, as if trying it on for size. "And where are your parents?" "Gone." A flat answer. Not sad, not angry. Just true. Eleanor hesitated, then pushed her plate forward. "Here. Take it." Malik stepped forward, carefully. He didn't lunge at the food or gobble it down. Instead, he picked up the fork, took one bite, and then sat on the ground beside her table, chewing slowly. Like he belonged there. "You're not going to eat it all?" she asked, almost amused. "Only what I need." She studied him for a moment longer. A boy like that should be scared, or hungry enough to be desperate. But he wasn't. He radiated calm. "You said you could heal me," she said, more curious now than skeptical. "How?" He swallowed, then looked up at her. "Not here. Not now. But if you want, I can show you." For the first time in years, Eleanor felt something she couldn't identify, a strange flutter in her chest. She told herself it was curiosity, but something deeper stirred. "I have bodyguards watching from inside. If you're a con artist, they'll have you gone in 2 seconds." "I know. But you'll want to come." Something about his certainty irritated her. Eleanor was a woman of logic, data, and control. She didn't like mysteries, she solved them. But this boy, he didn't fit. Against her better judgment, she said, "Where would we go?" Malik stood up, brushing off his shorts. "Not far. I just need you to trust me." Eleanor laughed again. "That's a tall order. But you will. You already do." And with that, he began walking down the sidewalk. She stared after him for several seconds before turning her head toward the restaurant window. Her assistant, Samuel, was watching her closely. She raised a hand, signaling him to stay back. Then, maneuvering her chair with practiced grace, she followed the barefoot boy into the unknown. They moved through the quieter parts of the city, past murals, alleyways, and closed storefronts. The sun dipped lower, painting the buildings in amber. He never looked back, and she never asked where they were going. Finally, he stopped in front of a run-down building that looked abandoned. Rusted metal gates, shattered windows, and faded paint marked it as forgotten. "Here?" Eleanor asked. "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure know how to make a girl feel safe." Malik didn't smile. He simply opened the gate and walked inside. Eleanor followed, the wheels of her chair crunching over scattered debris. Inside, the building was eerily quiet, yet strangely clean. A single room, lit by streams of fading sunlight through broken glass, held only a dusty wooden bench and a mosaic of candles and dried herbs on the floor. "You live here?" "Sometimes," he answered. "Sit there." She obeyed, parking her chair beside the arrangement on the floor. "Okay, Malik. I'm here. What now?" He walked to the center of the mosaic, then turned to face her. "Close your eyes." Eleanor hesitated. "Why?" "Because healing doesn't begin with sight. It begins with surrender." She didn't know why she listened. Maybe it was his voice, calm, sure, unshaken. Maybe it was because, in that moment, she had nothing to lose. Slowly, Eleanor closed her eyes. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the city outside. Then, something strange happened. She felt warmth, spreading from her fingertips up through her arms. Her spine tingled. Her breath caught. Images flashed behind her closed eyes. Memories. The accident. The hospital. Her grief. Her rage. Her climb back into power. And then, silence again. "Open them," Malik said. She did. He was standing in front of her, one small hand on her knee. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Nothing yet. This was just the beginning." And Eleanor, for the first time in 5 years, felt something in her legs. A flicker. A pulse. Hope. The flicker Eleanor felt in her legs wasn't a full sensation, but it was more than she had experienced in years. She stared at Malik, her normally unreadable expression cracked open by disbelief and something deeper, vulnerability. "You felt that," he said, not asking. She nodded slowly, afraid to say it out loud. "How backslash?" Her voice was hoarse. "I didn't heal you," Malik replied. "I just reminded your body what it forgot." Eleanor blinked, mind racing. "You're not just some street kid." Malik sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, facing her like a monk. "No. But I am hungry." She almost laughed, despite herself. "What are you, some kind of prophet?" He didn't answer. He simply closed his eyes and began humming a low, deep sound that felt impossibly old. The room vibrated with a kind of calm. Eleanor, despite herself, felt the tension drain from her neck and shoulders. Moments passed. When Malik opened his eyes again, the humming stopped. "I want to take you to someone," he said. "Who?" "My teacher." "Of course you have a teacher," Eleanor muttered, wheeling herself backward. "And where is this person?" "In the woods, just outside the city." "We'll go in the morning." "I can't just disappear into a forest with a barefoot child," she said. "I have a business to run. People will look for me." "You're already disappearing," Malik replied softly, standing. You've been disappearing for years." Those words hit her harder than she expected. There had been a quietness growing in her for a long time, a fatigue that not even power and luxury could drown out. She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured, clenched in her lap. "Where will I sleep tonight?" she asked. "I'll take you to a safe place." That night, Eleanor stayed in a humble apartment above a community center. Malik had led her through alleyways and back streets to a locked metal door behind an old church. Inside, Sister Bernice, a woman with silver braids and warm eyes, greeted her with no surprise. "We've been expecting you," the sister said simply. The room had a hospital bed, a wash basin, a kettle for tea, and walls lined with books. Eleanor had expected something colder. But the place was warm, spiritually warm. "Thank you," she said quietly. That night, she dreamt of running. Not in a panicked way, but free, barefoot, wind in her hair. She could feel the ground beneath her, soft and alive. When she awoke, her cheeks were wet with tears. The next morning, Malik arrived at dawn, holding a small cloth bag. "Ready? No breakfast?" she asked. "There'll be food where we're going." They traveled in Eleanor's personal vehicle, a van equipped for her chair. Malik gave directions that led them out of the city, through winding roads and dense thickets, until they reached a gravel path too narrow for the van to continue. "We walk from here," he said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I don't walk, remember?" Malik didn't flinch. "Then roll. I'll push when needed." And so they went. The gravel turned to dirt. Trees thickened around them. The forest wasn't dark, but dappled with golden morning light. Birds chirped in concert. Eleanor's wheels stumbled over roots and stones, but she said nothing. For reasons she couldn't explain, she trusted the boy. Eventually, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a small stone hut covered in moss and vines. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof. A woman emerged, tall, wiry, skin like polished bronze, and eyes the color of leaves after rain. "This is Amma," Malik said. The woman nodded at Eleanor. "Welcome, child." "I'm not a child," Eleanor replied reflexively. Amma chuckled. "Your body may be grown, but your soul limps far more than your legs." Eleanor bristled. "You don't know me." Amma stepped forward. "But I see you. And you've come for what you buried long ago." The forest felt suddenly quieter. Malik sat on the grass, content. "Why am I here?" Eleanor asked. Amma circled her slowly. "You live in a tower made of gold but built on sand. You think logic is your armor, but it is your prison. You ache not because your legs don't work, but because your spirit has no air." Eleanor's throat tightened. Amma knelt. "Will you let go?" "Of what?" "The belief that power is control. That strength is resistance." "I didn't come here for a lecture," Eleanor snapped. "I came because that boy told me he could heal me." Amma stood. "Then prepare to be undone." What followed was not magic, not ritual, not anything Eleanor could define. She was not bathed in light or struck by divine visions. Instead, she spent 3 days at the hut. She cooked meals with Amma using herbs she could not name. She listened to Malik hum old songs by the fire. She sat still, really still, for the first time in years. And with each day, her body stirred in strange ways. On the second day, she cried without knowing why. On the third, she dreamed of her mother, long dead, singing a lullaby. That evening, Malik took her hands and said, "Stand." She hesitated. He said again, "Stand." And she did. Slowly, shakily. Her knees trembled. Amma steadied her. "You remember," Malik whispered. Tears blurred her vision. "I don't understand." "You don't need to." That night, Eleanor lay on the grass beside the hut, looking up at the stars. Her legs ached, not from paralysis, but from use. A pain she welcomed. She whispered into the quiet, "Who are you, Malik?" He was silent. Amma answered for him, from the doorway. "He's what the world forgot. A truth-wearing skin. A boy who asks for nothing but leaves behind everything." Eleanor closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. The forest was still, and Eleanor felt every heartbeat, every breath, every rustle of the leaves like a drum echoing through her body. She had stood. She had walked, even if only a few feet. But it wasn't just her legs that were awakening, it was her soul. She remained by the fire that night, watching Malik from across the flames. He sat motionless, his small form lit in flickers of gold and amber. Eleanor wanted to ask him everything, what he was, where he came from, how he knew these things, but something told her that if she asked, she would ruin it. Some truths were not meant to be explained, only experienced. In the morning, she found herself standing before the hut again, this time without help. Her legs trembled, but they obeyed. Amma stood at the doorway, hands folded. "You're leaving today," she said calmly. Eleanor nodded. "I know. It will be harder when you return. I expect that. People will doubt. Doctors will run tests. The world will ask for logic. Proof." Eleanor smirked. "They always do." Amma stepped forward. "Then remember this. The miracle wasn't that you walked again. It's that you trusted something beyond yourself." She touched Eleanor's chest gently. "That part must stay awake." Eleanor looked over her shoulder. Malik was drawing something in the dirt, symbols she didn't recognize. He looked up. "You're not done." She tilted her head. "I thought I was healed." "You were helped," he corrected. "Healing is a journey." Eleanor walked toward him, careful, grounded. "What happens to you now?" He stood, brushing off his hands. "I go where I'm needed." "You're not coming back with me?" Malik smiled faintly. "You don't need me anymore." She felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Loss, love, reverence. She knelt before him. "You saved my life," she whispered. "I reminded you how to live it." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. Instead, she hugged him, gently, as if afraid he would disappear. He whispered something in her ear. "When the world gets loud again, listen to the quiet." Then he stepped back and disappeared into the woods. The ride back to the city felt different. Eleanor looked out the window, not at her phone or tablet, but at the trees, the roads, the sky. She breathed deeply. She flexed her toes inside her shoes. Samuel, her assistant, waited at her penthouse. He gasped when she stepped out of the elevator without her wheelchair. "Ms. Walsh, what happened?" She gave a small smile. "Everything." The days that followed were a media frenzy. News stations aired grainy footage of Eleanor walking again. Doctors examined her. Analysts speculated. Everyone had a theory: misdiagnosis, experimental therapy, divine intervention. Eleanor said nothing. She owed them no explanation. Instead, she returned to Le Monde d'Or, the same table, the same meal. She sat across from an empty chair and ordered an extra plate. The staff thought it strange, but didn't question her. She waited. Not for Malik. She knew he wouldn't come. But for what he represented. The stillness. The surrender. the impossible that dared to live just beyond reason. Later that year, she launched a new foundation, *** the Malik Initiative ***, funding grassroots healers, spiritual communities, and alternative therapies around the world. She did not attach her name or her story to it. She let it live on its own. Occasionally, she'd receive hand-drawn envelopes with no return address. Inside were symbols, herbs, a photo of a well dug in a rural village, a classroom in a desert, a boy standing beside an old woman with fire in her eyes. Malik was still out there. One night, while speaking to a room full of corporate leaders, Eleanor concluded her speech with something she never planned to say. "There will come a moment," she said, "when someone you don't expect will ask for something small. And in return, they will offer you something you cannot price. Don't dismiss it. Don't laugh. Because the world changes in those tiny moments, not in boardrooms." Silence followed. Then a standing ovation. But Eleanor wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at the back of the room, where a young boy stood barefoot, just watching. Then he was gone. She smiled. Because she knew now, miracles don't arrive with. They arrive hungry and ask for leftovers.